You know, we talk about revenue neutral on taxes all the time. If you make sales tax as part of that whole mix, won't a lot of people have the discretion of either buying something or not, and maybe that will have a negative impact on revenue coming into the state?
It's possible. And one of the benefits, as we look at the different types of taxes and who pays and who doesn't pay, one of the things about a sales tax is it's regressive. It hurts people who have less income more than those who have more income. It can be volatile in our case where it's very narrow. So every one of these taxes has pluses and minuses, and you know, that's part of the discussion that goes on. And so when you look at tax reform, there can be some shifting around in here that will help certain people and hurt other people.
It always used to be major categories affected the sales tax. People not buying cars and people not building houses, which is going on right now in this state.
Still is the case. Yeah, absolutely.
Today, so here we are, February of 2007. You know, the governor continues to claim we have a surplus of some sort. Yet, when you look at certain lines and revenue lines, we're not doing very well, are we?
No, we're not. And you know, the other thing that we've tried to come to grips with in the committee and within the caucus on the committee is that we think that if we were able to shift and relieve some of the burden, particularly in the category of income tax, that revenues may actually increase. So in thinking about that, we've considered, what do we do with that increase? What do we do with that growth? And our position has long been that we should return that to the taxpayer.
Are the Democrats admitting at all that there's a correlation between cutting taxes and economic activity? Let's look at the federal level. George Bush cut taxes in 2001, 2003. We've had major revenue growth, you know, 14% above budget on the federal level. Yet the Democrats never want to admit that there's a correlation. Are they admitting it at the State House in Augusta?
I don't think we see that kind of admission. What they have said to us, and the basis we're working on, is they want to reduce the burden on Maine taxpayers. And that, as we said, there seems to be two major roads open to us. One is exportability, in other words, getting more money, but that involves the opposite of what you're saying. That involves bringing more money from somebody else into state government, and therefore, without increasing spending, you can reduce the burden on Maine citizens. And the other is the revenue growth, which we are more enamored with. State government revenue does grow almost every year. We never do anything with that. We never identify it. We just, almost like it gets wasted. It just gets gobbled up in the current programs. What we're saying is if we identified revenue growth from year to year and dedicated it to rate reduction, that we would, over time, really create something. That was the Jeff Butland thing on the 117th. Senate Republicans tried to do that. The 118th, they repealed it. So
I remember that clearly. President Butland at the time said we're going to have an income tax freeze, that we will not collect any more money than we are collecting at this period in time, and anything above that will be returned to the taxpayer. The very first act when the Democrats took control in the 118th legislature was to repeal it.
Because you know what that means, and this is where the Democrats won't admit to it. If you agree to using revenue increases, that means their ability to increase programs, pay higher wages to more state employees is restricted severely. And it also accomplishes our purposes, which is to use the revenue increases to reduce rates or reduce taxes.
You know, everybody always says, what would the Republicans do if they were in charge? I think the 117th legislature proves what we would do. We froze the income tax rate. We were going to give tax relief to people. And the reason it happened is because the Republicans were in charge in the Senate, and it was a tied House. It was 75-75 and 1 in the House at that time. So people had to agree to a solution. We haven't had that in 10 years now. It's always been a top-down, here's what we're going to do, and you can either come along or not.
It's important to tell people what that means. I mean, that means that slowly over time you'd see the tax burden go down. It wouldn't be any big dramatic $500 checks cut, from Augusta sent back, because that's not how we didn't get to be the highest in the country with any big dramatic increase. It's been small increases over the years, and the only way we're going to get out of the woods is small decreases. So we need to be careful about laughing at the $50 decrease or the $100 increase, because
Well,
that's how it's going to happen.
And I think, to go back to your question about Democrats admitting that revenues are going to increase if you get Maine people to a position where they're paying less tax. They're never going to admit that,
Right.
because that would erode the basis for all of the policy that has existed since they've had control in Augusta.
Right. Okay, let's go back to LD1. LD1 was passed last session in the 122nd.
Yep.
I can tell you, in my town, we didn't see any tax relief from it. And I think many towns are now...
Did your town get any new money from the state education?
No,
money?
we lost money.
Right. Same as your
Yeah.
town and my town are very much alike.
Right.
A lot of lakefront property, so
Yep.
we lost money on LD1. even
But
though-
under LD1, eventually you get to a point where you're just back to where you were. And
Yes.
then local property taxes have to go up. Are local property taxes the one tax that you hear the most about?
Absolutely. It's just coming from the campaign and my door-to-door campaign, two questions came up, and 1A and 1B was, what are you going to do about my property taxes, and what do you think of Tabor? And so they were good questions, and they would dovetail into one another, but that's the focus, is property taxes, because the impact, the bottom line is, people can't afford them, they have to move from their homes, they've planned for retirement, and now some of them are making property tax payments that were equal to the house payment when they were working.
Right.
And that's effective, and that's really what's primary on their minds.
Okay. So the governor's proposing LD2, so-called LD2. It's not actually LD2.
It's not yet, although he's proposing
Yeah.
it.
It's a constitutional freeze on property values. Does it have any momentum? I know it's been tried many times, and it's never even come close to passing.
This is the most amazing thing, I think, or maybe the one of the most amazing thing. The governor back in June started talking about this. Before he was reelected, you know, I voted against it before. I thought it was a loser then, but I had no idea how it was going to play up here. And now it appears, here we are in February, it appears that even his own party is not at all interested in this. There are, it looks like, just a handful of people. This could change once he starts bringing it forward again, but I don't see this going anyplace.
The amazing thing about the governor's proposal, as I've read it, which is actually in LD 276, is that it's for land only.
Yeah.
And so how does that affect people in rural Maine? It doesn't, bottom line. If you live on the coast where the land is valued a lot more than the buildings on the land, that's terrific. So is it something for all Maine people? No, it isn't.
Even the Kit St. John's of Maine have indicated that it's really a shift from low-income to high-income people. The benefit would accrue to high-income people, in his opinion. So there just doesn't appear to be any momentum building for this.
But, I mean, under the proposal, it's not really like you get away from the taxes. It freezes it until you sell your property.
Right.
And then the government comes in and grabs it all again.
Right.
So-
And look at where we are with property valuations. I mean, the property is still appreciating, but it looks like the boom. So we now have appreciation tapering off, still increasing slightly. So there isn't going to be any,
Right.
even if this were invoked, there wouldn't be any big tax savings for people until property appreciates again, which it will eventually.
Well, and that's the piece that's so important. You have to deal with the valuation part of it in order to address that big thing called property taxes. I mean, you can reduce spending, you could enhance circuit breaker or homestead, but unless you start dealing with that valuation and the variety of ways houses and properties are valued across the state, you're only dealing with half the issue.
Right. And having said that, when you deal with evaluation, the municipalities, if they want to spend more, still can just increase the rates.
That's right.
Well,
That's right.
you know, being a selectman in my town now, we always look at Augusta as saying, you know what, we do a good job on the local level, but it's all the things that you make us do from the state level. I'm sure you hear that message quite often.
And it appears, there's another study out on LD1, and it appears that's true. The municipalities have held their spending increases to very low rates, below the cap. Counties are doing reasonably well, except for the 1 or 2 counties that built a new jail. It's the school districts. And, of course, the big thing left unsaid in all these studies is the state. Now, this governor's budget is